Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's eerily quiet in Tianjin right now. The city seems almost peaceful, a striking contrast to the whirlwind of diplomacy over the last 2 days. The SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, is finally over. Today was the second and the final day. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on his way back to New Delhi, and while the streets are quieter, the global headlines are anything but. Dominating social media and news headlines is not just the SCO leaders' meeting, but also the Modi-Putin bonhomie. It was on full display today. The two leaders met, they hugged, they laughed, and they hitched a ride together. We'll bring you the inside details of the big bilateral meeting, also the key takeaways from this summit, including the many viral moments and what it means for Chinese President Xi Jinping. Also how Washington is going to look at this. Donald Trump's trade advisor has chosen to play the caste card. You won't believe what he said. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Political crisis continues in Thailand as its largest opposition party holds a king-making summit, but fails to come up with a name for the country's next prime minister. Last Friday, a court had sacked Paetongtarn Shinawatra. The ruling has left Thailand with only an acting prime minister and a caretaker cabinet. Bangladesh's interim leader Mohammad Yunus issues a warning, says any deviation from the planned elections would be extremely dangerous. General elections are due to be held in Bangladesh in February 2026. This will be the first election in the country since the ouster of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina last August. India's Unified Payments Interface, or UPI, has reached a new milestone, surpassing 20 billion transactions in August. Earlier in the month, daily UPI transactions had crossed the 700 million mark for the first time. The Narendra Modi government has set a target of 1 billion UPI transactions a day. A plane carrying the European Union chief is hit by GPS jamming just as Ursula von der Leyen was to land in Bulgaria. The EU suspects that Russia could be behind this incident, but it's not clear if the aircraft was deliberately targeted, as such attacks are common in the region. And Guyana goes to the polls amid tensions with neighboring Venezuela. The election will decide who manages its booming oil economy and navigate a border dispute with Venezuela over the Essequibo region. It's where most of the South American nation's oil reserves are located. The results are expected by Thursday. The two-day SCO Summit has wrapped up. On paper, the highlight was the SCO leaders' meeting, but the real story unfolded away from the main hall, inside this room, where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi sat down with Russian President Vladimir Putin. It was a bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the SCO Summit, and it stole the spotlight. The pictures said more than any diplomatic statements could. Take a look at this. Summits are usually about stiff handshakes and rehearsed photo ops, but this one looked different. The warmth was palpable. Modi and Putin shook hands, the two leaders hugged, they strolled to the venue hand in hand. It's a scene that stole the show, so much so that it became one of the top searches on Chinese social media. The images went viral on Weibo, which is China's version of Twitter. The Russian Foreign Ministry called it the video of the day. Clearly, the bromance was on full display. There were laughs, easy banter between Modi and Putin, and even a tight huddle with China's Xi Jinping. It's a moment that spoke louder than any scripted summit line. But the image that truly went viral was this one. Prime Minister Modi and President Putin riding the same car. They carpooled to their bilateral meeting. And Russian media says this was not planned. In fact, they had no idea about it. Reports say Putin even waited for 10 minutes just so that Prime Minister Modi could join him. The ride was not long. They reached their destination in 5 to 10 minutes. But even after reaching there, the two leaders spent almost 45 minutes chatting in the car. It's not clear what they discussed. Prime Minister Modi said the conversation was insightful. And here's the kicker. This is exactly the kind of photo op that Donald Trump has long craved with Putin. You may remember the Alaska summit. Trump made a whole show by getting Putin to ride with him. But in Tianjin, it was Putin who initiated the carpool. And it only reaffirmed an old friendship. India and Russia have been sharing this ride for decades. Through the Cold War, through sanctions and shifting alliances. Today, the bonhomie was on full display. And talking about rides, Prime Minister Modi left in Putin's car, the Aurus Senat. This is a high-end Russian-made limousine. The Russian president regularly brings it on his foreign trips, and that's what he used today. But throughout the trip, the Indian Prime Minister used this car. It's China's Hongqi L5 limousine. The same model is used by Xi Jinping as a state car. It is usually reserved for top leaders. So this was Modi's ride for the trip. And then it was time for the bilateral meeting. That too started on a warm note. President Putin lauded the special relationship between the two countries, and Prime Minister Modi reiterated it.
Dear Prime Minister, dear friend, Russia and India have been maintaining special, friendly, trusting relations for decades, and this is a basis for the development of our relations.
Excellency, ये हमारे स्पेशल एंड प्रिविलेज स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप की गहराई और व्यापकता का परिचायक है। कठिन से कठिन परिस्थितियों में भी भारत और रूस हमेशा कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर चले हैं। हमारा करीबी सहयोग न केवल दोनों देशों के लोगों के लिए बल्कि वैश्विक शांति, स्थिरता और समृद्धि के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है।
So here are the three takeaways from this meeting. One, growing cooperation between India and Russia. Washington has accused India of funding Putin's war. That's because India buys Russian oil. Trump has used it as an excuse to slap 50% tariffs on India. But India is not backing down. Today's meeting was proof. Russian oil is central to India's energy security, and it will continue to flow. In fact, India and Russia are expanding cooperation. Listen to this.
We have developed cooperation at various levels. Trade and economic cooperation overall shows positive momentum. Tourist exchanges are developing. We closely coordinate our efforts on the international stage.
The second highlight from the Modi-Putin meet was a discussion on the Ukraine war. Of course, it came up. Prime Minister Modi reiterated India's stance on Ukraine. He called for a swift end to the conflict and a durable peace settlement. And Putin acknowledged India's role in pushing for negotiations. And this is quite significant because there's a clear disagreement over Ukraine. Modi calls for peace and Putin wages war. But they've made sure that this disagreement does not derail the broader relationship. On the contrary, Russia sees India as a key voice in the peace negotiations.
Excellency, यूक्रेन में चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय में हम लगातार चर्चा करते रहे हैं। हाल में किए गए शांति के सभी प्रयासों का हम स्वागत करते हैं। हम आशा करते हैं कि सभी पक्ष कंस्ट्रक्टिवली आगे बढ़ेंगे, संघर्ष को जल्द से जल्द खत्म करने और स्थायी शांति स्थापित करने का रास्ता खोजना होगा। यह पूरी मानवता की पुकार है।
And highlight number 3, the annual India-Russia Summit. This year will be the 23rd edition of the annual Bilateral Summit. New Delhi is hosting this one, and President Putin will be traveling to India for that. Prime Minister Modi made sure to underline the importance of that meeting. He said all of India was waiting to welcome President Putin.
आपको मिलना मतलब एक यादगार मीटिंग भी होती है, बहुत सी चीजों की जानकारियों का आदान प्रदान करने का अवसर मिलता है। हम लगातार संपर्क में रहे हैं। दोनों पक्षों के बीच नियमित रूप से कई उच्च स्तरीय बैठकें भी हुई है। इस वर्ष दिसंबर में हमारी 23वीं समिट के लिए 140 करोड़ भारतीय उत्सुकता पूर्वक आपका इंतजार कर रहे हैं। एक्सेलेंसी, ये हमारी स्पेशल एंड प्रिविलेज स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप की गहराई और व्यापकता का परिचायक है।
So that's the next big meeting to look forward to, the December meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin. If Tianjin was about optics, Delhi will be about deals, from energy and defense to trade, and the message for the world is quite clear. Despite the war in Ukraine and the tariffs from Washington, the India-Russia friendship is on solid ground. If you're complaining about Monday blues, spare a thought for Peter Navarro. He is the White House trade advisor, and this Monday hit him with images from the SCO. Pictures of Prime Minister Modi and Presidents Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping standing shoulder to shoulder, shaking hands, laughing, and even huddling. If you are Navarro, that's the nightmare reel for you. Because this is a man who accused India of getting in bed with authoritarians. And the next thing he sees are these images going viral. So he responded with what he does best, a rant. Listen to this.
So, look, Modi's a great leader. But I don't understand why he's getting into bed with Putin and Xi Jinping when he's the leader of the biggest democracy in the world. I would just simply say to the Indian people, please understand what's going on here. You've got Brahmins profiteering at the expense of the Indian people. We need that to stop.
When in doubt, play dirty. Navarro's latest jab was not just about trade or oil, it was dragging caste into the mix, accusing Brahmins of profiteering, all while ordinary Indians suffer. That's not diplomacy or leverage, that's a dog whistle. The idea is to paint India as feudal and corrupt. It's a new low, or another level of absurd, depends on how you see it. Either way, it is not acceptable. This is a man who clearly does not get facts. First, he called Ukraine Modi's war, and now he's playing the caste card on Russian oil. He's trying to lecture the world's largest democracy about its own energy needs. So let's give him some perspective. India is doing the world a favor by buying Russian oil. It is keeping global oil prices stable. Russia supplies nearly 40% of India's crude imports. If India stops buying from Russia, it will buy from elsewhere. And this will put pressure on other oil suppliers. It will drive up prices up to $200 a barrel. So like I said, India is doing the world a favor. And when the war broke out in Ukraine, Washington encouraged India to buy oil from Russia. In fact, India's oil minister has reiterated this in an op-ed. His name is Hardeep Singh Puri. He said India has not broken any rules in buying oil. Let me quote from his piece. Every transaction has used legal shipping and insurance, compliant traders and audited channels. India has not broken rules. So India did not break rules, and India won't stop the purchases because the Americans have changed their mind. In fact, New Delhi is heading in the other direction. Here's what a new report says, that Indian refiners will increase Russian oil purchases in September. They could go up by 10 to 20%, which means another 150 to 300,000 barrels per day. It's coming this month in September, and I'm sure Washington will throw another tantrum. They love lecturing India. But here's what they do not talk about. Europe still buys Russian gas. The US still imports Russian uranium, but it's India that is bankrolling Putin's war. The hypocrisy is glaring. When India buys discounted oil, it is aiding authoritarians. When Europe does it, it is maintaining stability. In fact, Navarro himself admits that the US needs uranium from Russia. If hypocrisy were an energy source, Washington could power the whole of Ukraine. And here's the biggest twist in the tale. Ukraine too buys Russian oil. You heard that right. Navarro may scream that India is a laundromat for Russian oil, but India also happens to be the biggest diesel supplier for Ukraine. We have the numbers again. In July 2024, India supplied just 1.9% of Ukraine's diesel needs. Today, it makes up 15.5% of Ukraine's imports. Kiev runs on it, literally, diesel from India. But try explaining that to Donald Trump or his team. Russia sells crude to India, India refines it, and Ukraine buys it. So is Ukraine too bankrolling Putin's war? Peter Navarro should talk about it, but something tells me he won't. His KRA, or key responsibility area, is just to target India. But guess who is singing a different tune? The US State Department, the US Embassy in India. In the middle of this acrimony, they have launched a charm offensive. A social media post that calls the India-US relationship the defining relationship of the 21st century, complete with hashtags like this. The contrast is comical. One American arm throws punches. The other hands out a friendship band. What do you make of it? Navarro's rhetoric is just a pressure tactic, and a poor one at that. Washington still wants India close, but it will have to make up its mind and mind its words and actions. Diplomacy is rarely about sweeping victories. It is usually about steady, incremental gains. And that's what India got at the SCO Summit. No, China has not become our best friend overnight. And no, Pakistan's terror tap has not been shut. But there are clear takeaways for New Delhi. The first one is on terrorism. India called out the double standards on terror. Prime Minister Modi raised the recent Pahalgam attack. He pushed for consensus on fighting cross-border terrorism.
भारत पिछले 4 दशकों से निर्मम आतंकवाद का दंश झेल रहा है। कितनी ही माताओं ने अपने बच्चे खोए और कितने बच्चे अनाथ हुए। ऐसे में प्रश्न उठना स्वाभाविक है, क्या कुछ देशों द्वारा आतंकवाद का खुलेआम समर्थन हमें स्वीकार्य हो सकता है?
That message was clearly aimed at Pakistan, which also happens to be a member of the SCO and was present in the same room. For decades, Pakistan has driven a campaign of terrorism against India. Pakistani nationals were also behind the Pahalgam attack, but earlier this year, the SCO refused to condemn that attack. The joint statement after the defense ministers' meeting did not even mention Pahalgam. But today that has changed. And it was India that pushed for that change. So in today's joint declaration, all member states of the SCO condemned the Pahalgam attack. They agreed that the perpetrators, the organizers and the sponsors must be brought to justice. And this is important because it sets the record straight. It exposes Pakistan. For India, it's a diplomatic win. The second takeaway is the reset with China. Prime Minister Modi met President Xi Jinping yesterday. They said India and China should be partners, not rivals. Easier said than done, given the many outstanding issues between the two countries. India and China still have an unresolved and contested border. They still have a massive trade deficit in China's favor. And the issues of China's military and diplomatic support to Pakistan, they're all there. But here in Tianjin, the two sides decided to explore convergences and to build a relationship based on mutual trust and respect. Translation? Right now, the more urgent challenge is the economy. Trump's trade war is disrupting old systems, so the need of the hour is to work together and contain the damage. Which brings us to the third takeaway, building alternatives. And that is India's biggest priority right now. It must find new markets for its goods. It must develop new trading partnerships and reduce trade deficits. And on this front, the Indian Prime Minister covered a lot of ground in Tianjin. He engaged with a wide range of partners. On the sidelines of the summit, he held 3 bilaterals. One, of course, was with China's Xi Jinping. Another with Russian President Vladimir Putin. We've told you about these. The third meeting was with Myanmar's current military leader. Now, Myanmar is India's gateway to Southeast Asia. It is critical for our border security, connectivity and energy needs. And across all 3 bilaterals, China, Russia, Myanmar, trade was discussed. And then at the gala dinner last night, there were at least 10 pull-asides, brief meetings. Prime Minister Modi met with leaders from Central Asia, neighbors like Nepal and the Maldives, and Southeast Asian powers like Vietnam. These interactions were informal, but an important part of diplomacy because they opened doors for future dialogue. They set the tone for further engagement. India also challenged the Belt and Road model of growth. Again, this is very significant. Prime Minister Modi said connectivity must respect sovereignty and territorial integrity. This was squarely aimed at China, a sharp and direct message to Beijing. Prime Minister Modi said India will help build links, but each country must stay in control of its own projects. No hidden strings, no debt traps. This is India's sovereignty-first model. And he presented specific examples of projects led by India, like the Chabahar port in Iran and the international North-South transport corridor. Prime Minister Modi pitted these against China's BRI. The message was quite straightforward. Democracies can grow fast too. Authoritarian control is not the only way to do it. So to sum it up, here is what India achieved in the Tianjin summit. On terrorism, it secured international support after Pahalgam. On ties with China, it set in motion a cautious reset. And on trade, it offered an alternative vision. Not the American way, not the Chinese way, but the Indian way. Speeches, official drafts, joint statements, bilateral meetings, like any major summit, the SCO gave us all of it. But it also gave us something far more entertaining. Real-time diplomacy caught on camera, where leaders came, they greeted, they walked, they laughed, and social media took notes. So here are some of the top viral moments from the Tianjin summit. Number 1 on our list, the huddle of the day. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Chinese President Xi Jinping, they were found huddling like old friends catching up. They chuckled, they exchanged a few words, they shared light-hearted gestures, and the camera zoomed in. And it wasn't the only such exchange of the day. Putin and Xi also found themselves in a similar moment, a brief exchange before the SCO dinner. It was so sudden, their translators had to rush it. Take a look at this one. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Modi showed off his diplomatic chops with seemingly endless handshakes and a few warm hugs. We tried to count, but we may have missed a few. And while the Indian Prime Minister met most leaders warmly, there is one encounter that caught everyone by surprise, a meeting between India and Turkey. Prime Minister Modi of India and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey were seen greeting each other with a firm handshake. It was followed by a friendly pat on the back. Now, if you follow this relationship, you know it's complicated. From Erdogan's interventions on Kashmir to his support for Pakistan, he's upset India on quite a few occasions. In fact, earlier this year, Indians were boycotting travel to Turkey. So this exchange between Modi and Erdogan was interesting, to say the least. Then came the unintentional comic relief. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, he was trying to make his mark at the SCO, and we understand why. As a failing economy, I'm sure there wasn't much to show anyway. So when Sharif saw the Russian president pass by, he took the opportunity. He sprinted towards Putin, evidently eager to shake the Russian president's hand. It was awkward and unmistakably comic, like someone trying to catch a train that's already left the station. And if you thought that was cringe, try this one. Prime Minister Modi and President Putin are walking and talking. The Pakistani Prime Minister is standing by, looking at them. Neither Putin nor Modi notice Sharif, but you can see the serious look on Shehbaz Sharif's face. He looks like someone who walked into the wrong party and is now trying to play it cool. Diplomacy has always had its performative elements, but Tianjin 2025 showed the world one thing, that body language, timing, and a good handshake can dominate headlines almost as much as trade deals and joint statements. They are a powerful tool for political messaging and par for the course in the age of social media. So while experts can debate on what each leader got, we can safely say that the internet got exactly what it wanted. handshakes, hugs, and memes, and small moments that made the biggest waves. Now let's talk about Xi Jinping, the host of the SCO Summit. This event was like a mission for him. It was about sending messages that China's influence remains intact, that US pressure has not broken his grip, and that Beijing can still gather leaders under one roof and join ranks against the US. For Tianjin, Xi Jinping found a common rallying point: Donald Trump and his tariffs. The US president has repeatedly threatened tariffs on China. He has vowed to weaken Beijing's economic clout. And look at the backdrop against which all of this is happening. 1, China's economy is slowing down. 2, this is a post-pandemic world that has been talking about decoupling from China, reducing dependence from China. So for Xi Jinping, this summit was an opportunity to show that decoupling is a thing of the past, that today's China is attracting partners. And its leader, Xi Jinping, is a unifier, a leader who brought a diverse range of players under one roof, from Iran to Russia, from India to Myanmar. Xi Jinping had the same message for all SCO members, that they're not alone, that here is a platform outside Washington's orbit. In fact, Xi put his money where his mouth is. He committed $275 million in grants for SCO members this year and more than $1 billion in loans. He made a push for an SCO development bank. He offered 100, and I'm quoting, small and beautiful livelihood projects. That's what he called it, small and beautiful livelihood projects. Also scholarships for young people across the bloc. So this was financial diplomacy on full display, another reminder of how China uses money as a lever of influence. But it comes with its own set of risks. Like I said, China's economy is slowing, its property sector is under strain, and its exports face pressure. So throwing money abroad may not be a sustainable option. But that's the path that Xi Jinping has picked. Despite his country's obvious economic challenges, he's keen on projecting strength. And with the SCO wrapping up today here in Tianjin, the action will shift to Beijing. The Chinese capital will host a massive military parade to mark 80 years of the end of the Second World War. And in attendance will be a host of world leaders, from Russia's Vladimir Putin to North Korea's Kim Jong-un and Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir. Well, he too is in China, Asim Munir. He attended the SCO Summit. He was spotted sitting alongside Pakistan's civilian representatives during bilateral talks with Iran. Asim Munir is expected to attend the military parade later this week in Beijing. Now remember, the SCO's core mandate is security. And on this front, China has not been consistent. Yes, the joint condemnation of Pahalgam attack is a step forward, but it's not enough to restore trust. With Pakistan's military leadership in attendance, the contradictions in China's position are exposed. Beijing may aspire to rival the United States as a dominant power, but SCO members are not looking for a China-led order. They're looking for options. They're looking for balance. And that is where Beijing's limits stand out. China is using American tariffs as an opportunity to win over more friends. But the fact is, China is also negotiating with the US. It still wants permanent tariff relief. And the US remains its largest trading partner, a partner that cannot be replaced overnight. So as of today, China cannot stand alone. Its biggest market is still America, and its partners at the SCO want choice, not dependence. For Xi Jinping, the SCO Summit was a stage to project strength. But it was also a stage that betrayed his limits. And now let's shift our attention to Afghanistan. An earthquake hit the country overnight, an earthquake measuring 6 on the Richter scale. It's typically a scale of 1 to 9, and experts say a quake measuring 6 is strong or significant. This one struck the mountainous eastern region, shaking buildings from Kabul in Afghanistan to Islamabad in Pakistan, leaving at least 800 people dead and more than 2,500 people injured. Rescue workers have been rushing to reach communities. The extent of the damage remains unclear. Officials are scrambling to assess it. Condolences have begun pouring in from all over the world, and New Delhi has assured assistance. Here's a report.
It happened late on Sunday. An earthquake of 6 magnitude hit Afghanistan. completely destroying many homes, wiping out entire villages, killing at least 800 people and injuring more than 2,500 people.
It was midnight when the earthquake started and shook us all violently, even breaking our house. God had mercy, and we managed to escape outside. From my own family, 5 nephews and 2 nieces were martyred, along with one of my aunts. The number of dead and injured is very high. This is the condition of all the houses here.
This was my brother's house, and he, along with 3 of his children, was martyred. My other brother, together with his sons, was also martyred there. 2 of my nephews have also been martyred. This is the condition of our home. Our dead are lying there on the ground. My brother and his children are there. You can go and see for yourself. This is the decree of Allah that has befallen us.
The earthquake struck Afghanistan's eastern Kunar province. Its epicenter was just 27 kilometers away from the city of Jalalabad, which is the nation's 5th largest. Tremors were felt in Afghanistan's capital Kabul and in neighboring Pakistan. Several aftershocks followed. The earthquake was shallow, with a depth of just 8 kilometers. This made it more destructive. Seismic waves travel from where the earthquake occurs to the surface where they cause damage. So when the earthquake happens at shallower depth, the waves keep more of their power as they hit the surface. This often leads to more intense shaking at the surface. And this is why, almost a day later, authorities are still scrambling to understand the extent of the damage. Rescue workers have been rushing to reach communities in mountainous areas hit by the quake. But the remoteness of areas has made search operations even harder. Rescue teams couldn't reach them until morning because the roads were blocked. Most buildings in Afghanistan are low-rise constructions, with homes in remote areas made from mud bricks and wood. Many of them are poorly built, so as homes collapsed like a cart of decks. Masses of people were trapped under the rubble.
These details are for now, as these numbers may increase as rescue work is underway in various areas. And we have some areas where rescue teams have not yet reached due to difficult terrain. We had reached them via helicopter, but not by road as it's very difficult. And there are some villages where wounded and killed are still being recovered from rubble. So that's why numbers may increase.
The Taliban government has deployed soldiers. Hundreds of bodies have been pulled out from under the rubble. Rescuers are ferrying injured people on stretchers from collapsed buildings and into helicopters, airlifting them to hospitals. NGOs have also stepped in to help, as locals frantically dig through the rubble with their hands.
I want the government to come and help us to remove our injured and dead from the ground. Everything here has been destroyed.
A special committee has been formed by the Taliban government to aid victims of the earthquake. A fund has been allocated for the victims. Meanwhile, condolences have poured in from across the world, including India, China, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Japan. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said he is deeply saddened by the loss of lives and assured all possible humanitarian aid and relief to those affected. Afghanistan is no stranger to deadly earthquakes. The country is located in a quake-prone zone, with many people living on or near geological fault lines. In 2022, a 5.9 magnitude quake struck southeast Afghanistan, killing at least 1,000 people. In 2023, 3 major earthquakes rocked Afghanistan's Herat province, killing nearly 1,300 people. But the recent tragedy is only the latest in a series of crises affecting Afghanistan. Since the Taliban returned to power in 2021, international assistance has gradually dwindled, leaving less than 30% of its humanitarian needs covered, and shutting down hundreds of hospitals and clinics. In this country devastated by decades of war, a deadly earthquake has added to the plight of its people.
Our next story is from Indonesia, where deadly protests have erupted. They began last week as a peaceful demonstration, but then quickly turned into riots, leaving at least 5 people dead. Thousands of Indonesians took to the streets. They set fire to legislative buildings and looted homes of lawmakers. The government responded with military action. This is Indonesia's worst wave of protests in years. But what is behind it? And what does it mean for the government? Here's a report.
Thousands of protesters on the streets, buildings and vehicles torched, homes looted, at least 5 people killed, and many others injured. As Indonesia sees its worst wave of violent protests in years, it all began last Monday. Rallies erupted in Jakarta over perks of lawmakers. Recently, Indonesia approved a monthly housing allowance of $3,000 for lawmakers. This is more than 10 times the national average minimum wage in the country. As living costs rise and wages stagnate, resentment has grown among ordinary Indonesians. Amid this, the lawmakers' perks came as a shock. So protesters, mainly made up of students and labor union members, took to the streets. It was peaceful at first, but things quickly turned deadly. On Thursday, August 28th, anger escalated. A motorcycle taxi driver, 21-year-old Afan Kurniawan, was run over by a police vehicle at a protest site. This triggered a clash between the police and protesters.
The trigger was the death of our friend Afan. I cried seeing the news. I'm appalled and angry.
Demonstrations continued into the weekend, spreading across the country. Protesters set fire to legislative buildings. They looted the houses of parliamentarians, forcing the Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto to cancel his planned visit to China and respond with a two-pronged approach, backtracking while tightening his fist. The president made an announcement on Sunday, flanked by the leaders of various political parties.
The House of Representatives leaders announced that they would repeal several parliament policies, including the amount of parliament member allowances and the moratorium on overseas working visits.
After reducing lawmakers' benefits, he also ordered stern action by the military and police.
I have ordered the police and the Indonesian National Armed Forces to take the strongest possible action against all forms of damage to public facilities, looting of individual homes, public places.
After the crackdown, protests have simmered down, but many demonstrators remain undeterred.
The reason we're still protesting on the streets is that President Prabowo's statement yesterday in his press conference did not accommodate demands from students and civil society. Besides that, there's too much involvement of the military in the demonstrations. We don't want civilian spaces to be infiltrated by the military, as we fear there could be a martial law.
Economic and political frustration has been brewing for months. It has been a year of protests against President Prabowo. He is a former army general with a controversial past. He took over as president last October. He promised to tackle corruption and boost self-reliance. But many of his policies have been widely controversial, including reforms to expand the military law, proposals to raise land and property taxes, and a free school lunch program that has been marred by mass food poisoning cases. While protests have ebbed and flowed, the latest wave is the most significant challenge to President Prabowo's leadership. Indonesians see his concessions as a band-aid solution. Until their economic hardships are addressed, the country remains on edge, waiting for another round of protests to inflame.
International summits are not marathons. They're carefully choreographed dances. And sometimes you just have to wait your turn. Yes, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif missed the memo. He has provided the internet with its latest gift, the Shehbaz Sprint. Like I mentioned before, the Russian president was passing by him After the family photo, Shehbaz Sharif seized the opportunity. He sprinted towards Putin just to shake his hand, and the internet had a field day. Take a look. And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un inspects a new missile factory ahead of his visit to China. Cuba's iconic vintage cars parade through the streets of Havana. And a slipper-kicking competition kicks off in Japan. Finally, we're taking you back in history on this day in 1939. Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler invaded Poland, and so began the Second World War. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. As Trump's trade war rattles the world, all eyes turn to Tianjin, host of the SCO Summit. Prime Minister Modi makes his first visit to China in 7 years. India's policy of multi-alignment faces its biggest test. Will the outreach to China open the door to a new partnership? And will talks with Russia add weight to India's stance against trade wars and tariffs? Catch Vantage live from Tianjin.